Welcome to Project Book Club, where UFOs and UAP have close encounters with morning coffee. Grab a fresh mug and enjoy our steaming hot takes on this month's book that deals with anomalous phenomena. Brand new, classic, and often controversial. We talk about the ideas and we read between the lines. Now here's Bryce Zabel in Hollywood and Chrissy Newton in Toronto.
Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Project Book Club. I'm Bryce Zabel, and I'm here in sunny and extremely hot Los Angeles right now with a strong cup of coffee that is also extremely hot. So I think I'm ready. Just might keep you up at night with this book we're about to talk to you about, though. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, Chrissy Newton, who's over in Toronto. And I just got to say, you've had a very busy month yourself, haven't you?
I've had such a busy month. I've been traveling. We were talking in last podcast. I was in Wisconsin, and then I was in Virginia, and I was at the Monroe Institute. So that has, I'll just say, a very life-changing experience that I didn't know I was going to have. I think I thought that it was going to be very amazing, but I didn't think it was going to be life-changing.
Well, let's do a little background on that because I think a lot of people don't know anything about the Monroe Institute. So tell us what it is and what you did when you got there.
Yeah, for sure. So the Monroe Institute started in the 1970s by a man named Bob Monroe. Bob Monroe was a broadcaster and had an out-of-body experience and was going through different levels of consciousness. And he was fascinated by it. And he was trying to be able to capture that feeling consistently. And to learn more about it, he decided to spend pretty much all of his money and moved out of broadcasting and started this institute that's in Virginia called the Monroe Institute. And so what they do is you go through different levels of expanded consciousness. Some people are like, this is part of the CIA, is a cult. It's like, no, it's actually not any of that. It's understanding consciousness to yourself, to the others around you, and looking at the question of what it means to be alive and what it means to be human and what is consciousness. And so it was an unbelievable experience I had with a group of creators from all over the world. There were people from Pakistan. There were people from all over the United States. There were people from Europe. And we had an experience, I think, together that most of us never knew that it would probably change our lives. And I was watching people's lives change in real time. And so people are asking, well, what is that? I was watching people go through different levels of trauma and understand their trauma from their past. Different self-awareness was happening, understanding capabilities that people probably had that they didn't know through meditation. It was unbelievable. And so if anything, I would highly suggest, if no one's ever gone to the Monroe Institute, I take a look at them. It was fun. I thought it was going to be scary, but It was far from that.
Well, so I don't even know how that would work. Obviously, a lot of things are being discussed and tried out there. What's a typical day like when you go for their annual event?
That's a great question. So you meditate for about 5 to 6 hours a day. So each meditation, is around an hour to 45 minutes. But when I walked out of the first, or I think it was a second, maybe meditation, the first or the second, I looked at Megan, who was one of the creators there. She was a TikToker. And I said to her, I'm like, I wish the meditations were longer. And she's like, what? And I said, yeah, they're so short. They're like 15 minutes. And she's like, no, Chrissy, they're not. They're 45 minutes to an hour. And I went, what? I'm like, because there's no time, right? There's no clocks. You're asked, you can look at your phone, but you're asked not to look at the time, to forget about time and to really focus on self and focus being present and in the space of meditation as well. So you then go through a meditation, and then after that, you get together as a group and you debrief. You have lunch together, you have dinner together. And so there's obviously free time, but it's a place to really unwind and relax as well while you're going through these other meditations. And as you're going through each day, learning how to go through different conscious levels, they use numbers and colors to do this. So it's really easy to guide. It's, again, not culty, but it has an easy way to follow that anyone can do. And you're listening, the huge point, you're listening to binaural beats. And so these binaural beats that Bob Monroe has created specifically are from the Monroe Institute, and they're designed to bring you through these different conscious levels. So yeah, you're listening to binaural beats and you're meditating for about 5 to 6 hours a day. It was exactly what I needed from a busy life. And Bryce, I know you need this because you are so busy. Just outside of, just to go to meditate, I think you would enjoy. But yeah, I highly recommend.
It's funny you would say that because honestly, I don't think I have meditated a single minute in my entire life in the classic sense of meditation, unless you want to call listening to Beatles albums in college meditation, which I thought they were at the time. But I suppose it would be good. But I honestly, the idea that you went there and for 5 or 6 hours you meditated sounds very extreme. But then I have a son who goes to a silent meditation retreat for a week every year. So he goes someplace, nobody talks for an entire week. He meditates. I could never do it, but he does, and he gets a lot out of it.
You know what? I respect that. I went for a week at Monroe too. And at one point, we do a silent morning, and I was walking around. And for someone who's hyperverbal and likes to talk, I really enjoyed it. I was like, oh, I like this. I like not talking to anybody, and being around people was wonderful. But yeah, it was peaceful. And meditating for a week I was the same way. I never thought that I would be a meditator, but I am. I do yoga, so I do like active meditation for mindfulness. But I think meditation has bad branding, and I would like to rebrand meditation for people that don't really, they might misunderstand it. It's great for mindfulness. It's great for health and wellness, 100%. I'm not going to say it's not. But what also meditation can bring you into different conscious levels. And that's something that I never really knew or thought about until probably the past 5 years when the Monroe Institute was introduced to me. So now I look at meditation very differently than I did before. I look at to expand my consciousness, to have a better understanding of myself and others. And maybe I'm not going to fully understand what the concept of what is real and reality, but you're playing in different realities and you're learning about those different realities. It's quite unbelievable.
It's commendable. And I'm really glad you had that experience. And, I wouldn't call this meditation, but I have been swimming for an hour a day most days. And there's something about that feels like it's a meditation because you're certainly not listening to much of anything. You're just in your own head for this hour, and it's very rhythmic and all that. So it feels, maybe I could meditate. But right now I just feel like there's a lot on the plate. And so the idea that you actually turned your brain off for a while, that's very commendable because I don't think I'm in the headspace where I could do that right now. But who knows?
I was so busy before, so I was really looking forward to this. A couple months previous, I was just so busy, and I was like, I can't wait to get away for a week to just decompress. Even though I'm writing about it and it's for work, it really was like a type of mindfulness vacation. But I will say, what you're doing is an active meditation. For sure, it is. It's active, sure. Right? Things like bodybuilding, and yoga, mm-hmm. They're actually very similar for the mind. Most people wouldn't know that, but you have to meditate too, do an active meditation when you're bodybuilding. So I would say swimming is exactly the same thing. You do have to shut off and focus on your movements. And that's what part of mindfulness is, right? Is you're shutting down the brain to be able to find mindfulness and find some peace.
Well, there was no time to do that last month. It was a very busy month for me for reasons that some of you know about and others don't, I guess. And, we had a very big book to take a look at. And let me introduce that book to everybody right now, because it's right behind you right now. It's God's Man in War, Volume 3. And let me explain to people what we're talking about. This is a Tom DeLonge, and I'm going to put it in front of them. There you go. Tom DeLonge and his partner, Peter Levenda, first wrote Chasing Shadows, which was part of their Sekret Machines series. And what they did is they wrote 3 books that were fiction, and this is one of them. But they also, at the same time, wrote 3 books that were nonfiction that have come out at different times. Now, the first one of the nonfiction was God's, then the second one was Man, and then you and I chose, or rather I chose, and I forced you to read it, as you're going to force me to read one at the end of this thing. We read about war. And first, just a couple of words about the authors before we talk about the book itself. I mean, everybody knows Tom DeLonge right now in the UFO space. We know him because, well, first of all, he was the front man for Blink-182, and most people know him for that, and all their hit singles and everything. But he's also been historically obsessed with UFOs since he was a teenager. He's written songs about aliens, and he's the guy that started the To the Stars Academy back in 2016, and he's been also very public about meeting with insiders in the military to sort of get their take on things. And I think what he's been saying with his fiction and his nonfiction is that a lot of what he's saying is from some of those meetings. And Peter Levenda is a completely different cat. I mean, he is more of an author than you would think of Tom DeLonge. He's also more of a researcher. He's a historian, and I think he's made his bones, if you will, in writing by writing about politics and religion. He also has written extensively about, and this makes him unique. He has written extensively about Nazis. He's written extensively about the occult. And he's written extensively about Cold War covert operations. So you put these two guys together, and I guess my thinking in picking this book was, okay, I think war is an interesting topic because people are constantly discussing the threat narrative and whether that's realistic or unrealistic. And Tom DeLonge, in a lot of his interviews, has said very interesting things about his respect for the military, etc. So, Chrissy, that's what I kind of thought. Let's get this book out. Now, I think, people should see it's a thick book. But on the other hand, I did find that it had nicely spaced pages. I found it kind of fun to read it. I think we talked about this. I've read most of the last books, even though I own them in hardcover. I read them on Kindle because I could read them at, whatever. I ended up reading this one, to be completely honest with you. I read it completely as a hardcover because A, it had big type and lots of white space, and the book would stay open when you laid it open in front of you. Now, I know those are silly things. This is a book club, and it was very tactile. I enjoyed that aspect of reading it. And of course, none of that is about what's in it. So I'm going to let you run with some opening remarks on what you thought about the experience.
It's a huge book. So it's 600 pages. It is jam-packed with so many history nuggets I never knew that I didn't know, and was so pleasantly surprised to read them. But before I start with my praise, I'll give them a little bit of criticism. I listened to this book and read it. I did a combination of both because I was traveling and just for time's sake. The reading version was fine, but the audio version the narrator was horrible. So I wouldn't recommend that per se. I wish Tom DeLonge read this or Peter did. It would have just been so nice to hear it from their perspective, and they have better voices than the narrator did. But outside of that, I also felt that they repeated a lot of information consistently. To information, to call information, it was always repeating the same history nuggets all the time. And maybe there's a mechanism for that so that people remember and they don't forget. And that was something that I thought I personally didn't like, where I'm like, yes, we know that you don't have to keep repeating it. For the people that were listening in the back, maybe maybe they'll remember. But that was my own real criticism to it. Outside of it just being so long and so in depth, I guess that could be, if someone could say that would be a criticism to some degree, but I actually liked it a lot. I really enjoyed the book. I thought that Tom DeLonge and Peter did an unbelievable job in the history and the rundown. It was the most history-packed UFO book I think I've read to date. And my mouth dropped. I literally went down multiple rabbit holes after. And that's why it took me so long to read. I legitly finished it today because I got stuck on side tracks and side missions, learning about other characters in history,
You were meditating.
specifically Jack Parsons.
Yeah. Well, tell us you brought him up. Tell us who he is first.
Yes. Jack Parsons, as you can say, is one of the creators that started JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, or also could be known as the Jet Parsons Laboratory. And he was one of before von Braun, who was a Nazi scientist, was working on rocket propulsion and working on how to be able to use jet propulsion, or how to be able to use this for planes to be able to move quicker within war, because we actually didn't have this kind of instant acceleration back then. It was taking so long for planes to lift off. And so he was working, which they called the Suicide Squad, with a group of friends at Caltech that then was dabbling in rocket propulsion. It's unbelievable. And outside of having that as a day job, first of all, the worry that you might blow yourself up every day at work, and with the nickname the Suicide Squad, you would think that would be enough for you on your day job. But no. Right. Jack Parsons was a huge advocate for the occult, and was moving up the OT and the AA, which are related. They are occults, Aleister Crowley adjacent organizations, that he was moving himself up the ladder in the evening. Like we could do an entire podcast on Jack Parsons, but the man was unbelievable. Maybe a tad bit scary in how intense he was. But if it wasn't for Jack Parsons and the rest of his Suicide Squad, we would not have JPL.
That's all true. And I'm probably going to piss a lot of people off right now. Maybe even you,
Okay.
Chrissy. But okay, first, I really like Tom DeLonge. I really, really like Tom DeLonge. I like to hear him talk. I like what he thinks about. I don't agree with 100% of everything that Tom DeLonge has ever said, but he always strikes me as a guy with his heart in the right place. And he does strike me as a guy that's probably better read than I am on this topic. I mean, he probably had a lot more time, going on tour with Blink 182 to read all these books. And he seems very well informed. I think, as I read this book, I didn't really like it. I liked part of it. And I wish I liked it more. The parts I liked a lot were the very beginning and the very end, because they felt like they were derived from Tom's brain, and the inside of it with a cult and Nazis and mythology and all this stuff seemed like a sidebar issue to me. And I will say I have to agree a lot with the idea that there's too much repetition. Now, at one point, and you can tell in a book when one person's writing something in a duo. I mean, that happens. And clearly Levenda was writing the interior portion primarily. And he does say, I'll be repeating some stuff because it's important and blah, blah, blah. And so I was prepared for that, but boy, over and over, it's almost like there was no editor on this book, to be quite honest. I mean, if I'm just being completely honest, I felt like, dude, you need to get yourself an editor. You need to cut this section down, and you need to focus on what the title of the book is, because that's what really ticked me off about it. This is a long title for a book. It's something like Sekret Machines, God's Man in War, an official... I can't even read it without my glasses. I'm going to read you the whole title. God's Man in War, an official Sekret Machines investigation of the UFO phenomenon. Okay, well, half of the stuff that's in there, when you talk about mythology, that should have been in the God's book. And frankly, it is. The Man book, there's, some of that stuff with Parsons and all that. You could have put that in the Man section. Most of those things, to me, had absolutely nothing to do with the war section at all. And that's why I came to the party. So I was really disappointed. I just felt like, wow, you guys had such an opportunity here. And first of all, I'm going to let you react to that. I have more to say, but I just feel like what we had here was an incredible missed opportunity to actually deal with what the book said it was going to be about. It did not live up to its expectations of what it should have been about based on its title.
So, okay. I understand where you're coming from, and I agree that it didn't have an editor because I thought the same thing a couple times. I went, how is an editor letting all of this repetition fly? Like it's becoming redundant at this point. But I think that it did hit the nail on the head when it came to the theme of war from all different perspectives. And I really enjoy Tom DeLonge and Peter's history beats when it comes to looking how you look at war and perspectives. Looking at it from an American perspective, looking at it from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, looking at it from an Eastern perspective, even looking at it from an internal terrorism perspective, looking at it from even the continent in Africa and how that has even what has happened through cosmologies. You could even look at that as being an internal war of even, a worldly civil war with ourselves and forgetting that cosmology, which is so important. And then that colonism has taken from people within Africa, throughout Africa in the continent. Looking deeply into the Nazi issue and the history behind it, which is so, first of all, horrific and so sometimes hard to even read and to think about when all of those horrible atrocities happened. And then, and then looking at it in the end of it, of how we look at how we view the alien issue. And I believe you are right. I never thought about this coming from a Tom DeLonge perspective, because it very much echoes Tom's voice, how we should view this when we do have contact. So I think that they really took on a massive job to do this. But if I literally recommended this book today to a friend he messaged me and said, Chris, you're doing so much work. You've been talking to Avi Loeb. You've been writing about this. You're following 3i Atlas. What are we going to do if this is contact? And isn't this going to be wild if this is in our generation? And I said, yeah. I said, but you know what you need to read right now is Tom DeLonge's book, because this might set you up for it. So here you go. Have a read on this. I said, it's a massive book, but it will bring you, it will give you a great history rundown, and it'll make you look and think about the UFO topic more than you ever will. Hate me for saying it. I like it. I didn't think I was going to like it.
Listen, it's a free country and a free book club. But that's what I disagree most about, which is, it's got a lot of history in it, but it is not the best UFO history book I've ever read. For that, I'd have to say Dolan's written some superb history books. And even my old podcast partner, Ross Coulthart, wrote a superb book, Within Plain Sight, where he sort of laid out all that stuff. So what Levenda does in the interior section is he sort of proves how smart he is about Nazis and occult and JPL by writing at great length about them. But I got to tell you, I don't for 1 second believe that the Roswell crash was a Nazi flying saucer. And frankly, they say it was in this book, and they have one source that they don't name for it. It's not acceptable to me to spend 50 pages talking about this and then come down to a conclusion like, oh, by the way, Roswell was a Nazi flying saucer, and I have a source. Well, I'm not going to tell you who it is, and I don't know, I want to say they, but I don't think DeLonge was part of this. I think it's Levenda who then went in and says, he goes he talks about Operation High Jump down to Antarctica right after the war, and with all kinds of implications, but proves nothing about it. It doesn't take you into understanding why they were actually in Antarctica. It's a disappointment, and it doesn't. Let me just give you a few examples. Okay, I got to put my glasses for this one. All right, for a book that is titled War, there is very little actual speculation or narration or specifics about how a conflict with non-human intelligences might unfold. These are questions I had that were not answered in a book called War. This is by two people claiming they're going to be talking about non-human intelligences and all that. Okay, question one. If UAPs can disable nuclear weapons, could they also neutralize satellites, blind radar, or collapse our power grids? I'd like to hear a little bit about what our weaknesses are in a war with a potential alien consciousness or a non-human consciousness. I'd like to know what assets they might have and how they might bring them to bear on us. I'd like also to know, do we have advanced tech, reverse engineered or otherwise, that could give us parity in a war? I mean, that's what the book promises. I see some general comments about it at the beginning and the end, and I like those a lot. I mean, if the book was all about the beginning and the end, and it lived up to that, I would have liked it a lot. Also, is this an Independence Day scenario that they're saying might be a war with a non-human intelligence where we're outgunned, or are we secretly better prepared like in the Independence Day sequel? I mean, where do they think we are? I don't want to know about Nazi flying saucers you can't prove. I want to know what you think we have right now and how it will stack up against what somebody else might have. I'd like to see those scenarios that we know have been worked out in the Pentagon and other defense establishments. I'd like them to speculate. Are there multiple alien factions? And if so, does that mean that we have the possibility of an alliance? Well, if there's a war, look at World War II. The Soviet Union and Germany started on the same side and ended up fighting a battle that led to the end of Nazi Germany. I'd like to know also, are today's SCIF briefings in Congress quietly discussing any of these war scenarios? I guess I just felt like, come on, guys, tell me what the U.S. military really has. Tell me how much the world really has in terms of military assets.
Well,
paint a picture for me of exactly what can actually happen in a war, and based on the information we have about what our own pilots have seen and reported over the last 75 years about these so-called non-human intelligence, either flying saucers or UFOs or UAP. Tell me what they've got. Then paint me a picture about what's going to happen when they go against each other. I got none of that. I got none of it, and I was disappointed. I'll take my glasses off now.
That's fair. That's totally fair. First, a few things. What you say about, looking at war and what the possibilities could be within the future, right, and speculating and philosophizing on it, I think is a great idea. And Tom does do that. Yeah. Right. I think Tom does do that in the last chapter, right? He really does try to focus on what, if there was an alien invasion, big D, little d contact, how would we go about doing this? And then how should we do our own internal speculation, or our own internal, have our own internal dialogues. He makes a really good point. And, this might trigger some people, but it is I think, a reality. We have to understand our own colonization of what we've done to our own planet and how we've done this to each other, in all specific groups, so that we can understand what colonization actually means if we are being colonized. So he looks at it from different perspectives and different angles, but I feel that you're right. There could have been way more. Now the question is, and I actually don't know, when was the book written?
It's the last of the bunch, I think.
But what year was it? Was it?
I think it's very recent. I'm looking.
Yeah,
right
was
now.
it? Well, and first of all, thank you, Tom.
2024.
Okay, was it? Okay, so it was last year.
2024, and that's why I thought Chrissy to be on last year.
This year?
Well, it came out in 24.
2024, you said, or 2004?
No, 2024.
I did not know this came out last year. So
That's
I
what
will
it
say
says.
one thing. Thank you, Tom DeLonge, for mentioning the debrief right off the hop.
That was nice. I thought of you when that happened.
I laughed where I was like, love it. And I'm not just being biased because of it. But
if only he'd mentioned Need to Know, I might have liked the book more. But
Yeah. Okay. So I do agree. I didn't realize that it wasn't written. It was written last year. 100% aligned on that, Bryce, that it should have mentioned things that happened in Congress. It should have mentioned the political aspects that could potentially, lead to war or have a conversation about war. He focused on the military industrial complex and national security extremely hard throughout the book. But what I see Tom doing when he's saying the word war as a theme and what that means is, what does this mean from a historical perspective? And why is war such a major theme when it comes to UAP, and why is it wrapped around UAP, and how it has been from the east to the west and all over the world, and how war really does propel the UAP topic, and it always has. And so I think that's what he's getting at when I read this. That's how I see him referencing war. But you're right, there could be a total separate book around this that is related to war and national security, but also the political aspect of this. Maybe he needs to write another version now where it's just politics. And I hate to say it, but
where I got frustrated, I mean, I will say this. It's obvious from my statements, it was a frustrating read for me. Started out, I wrote you when I first started and said, this is really good. It's going to be a great book. And then I went in the dumper in the middle of it, kind of crawled back out a little bit. It was frustrating to read because think about this. Pages and pages and pages about mythology and Jack Parsons and occult people who I've never heard. Granted, I learned a little bit about the occult and all that, but pages and pages and pages of that, but not one mention of Lou Elizondo, for example, who has been saying, yeah, we got to plan for the worst. Not anything about the fact that a lot of these people who have been talking openly about UFOs in Congress have been basically saying it's a national security issue, right? They have been hitting us hard with, that's been the way in to unleash these hearings even. They haven't unleashed hearings in order to answer the esoteric question, are we alone in the universe? No, these hearings are being launched because there's drone incursions that we can't explain. There's UAP flying around doing impossible to believe acrobatics around our own aircraft during our own military maneuvers. And there's and there's rumors that we've been reverse engineering stuff and that we either have craft or that we've reversed things. Damn, I'd rather spend, take 50 pages out of that midsection and tell me about that. Tell me what we're facing. Because here's the thing. I feel like if I really want the answers to a book called War, I'm going to have to read another book now. I'm going to have to go refresh my memory with Dolan and Coulthard and all the rest and say, let me see what these guys have to say about it because I didn't get it here. I'm sorry, I'm on a rant. But every once in a while you got to go on a rant.
No, I agree. That's fair. I didn't realize, again, it's 2024. It's not as currently up to date as I would hope it would be. But he does speak to propulsion. He doesn't speak to the main characters in the most recent days. And I actually kind of like that personally. I'm a huge history buff and I like how he presented the history because again, it made me go down multiple rabbit holes that I will be going down now. Thank you, Tom DeLonge, for the next year, which is fantastic, and been watching other documentaries and reading so many other things now. But there was a couple times where I went, I'm not going to remember who all these people are. And that was the challenge where I was like, Chrissy, you got to write down their names. You've got to write down points, times and histories or keywords because you're not going to remember. There was a couple even government projects when he speaks to about manipulation and propaganda and PSYOP projects, and which I'm deeply fascinated in. And, the CIA and what the CIA did when it came to working from, MK Ultra to multiple different PSYOP projects. I wish he had a whole section on that and went deeper into that because I find that to be very, very interesting. And some of those projects I didn't even know. So now the work that I'm doing adjacent to that has brought me down different roads. So I think what I should say is that for a book that is so deep into history, I appreciated it because it taught me things that I didn't know. And I'm happy to say that we can't know everything about UAP. It's impossible. So when older evidence is brought up in comparison to the work that I do in journalism, it makes me really excited because it unlocks new levels in my mind and new
Right.
findings to be able to beef up my own journalism. So I appreciated that. But I do agree. There were so many people that have passed through my mind now that are probably hanging out my subconscious that I don't will never remember who they were in case if they ever do get brought up, maybe I will. But it was just so rich for that. So you are right. I think there was a couple people a couple things that we could have left out.
I think we both agree that the ending raises all the possibilities that I'm talking about. So I don't mean to diminish that, but it raises them more as generalities without specifics. Okay. So for example, just something I kind of thought I'd be reading about in this book. I thought that their opening was setting the table with these general areas that they would then harvest in specifics. So, for example, this is just an example, and I'm not saying it's a failed book because it doesn't have this specific in. I'm just using it as an example. But I'd like them to tell us how fast the fastest submarine in our fleet goes. I'd like them to tell us in this book how fast the fastest jet aircraft that we have in our U.S. military, how fast does it go? And then I'd like them to tell us how fast these other things are supposedly going, because we do have estimates of that. I mean, we've had Tim Gallaudet tell us how fast he thought they were going, and it was much, much faster than us. And we've had Ryan Graves and David Fravor talking about how fast their craft were going, and it was pretty damn fast compared to ours. That would have given us a way to look at the potential conflict. And the reason I think it's kind of important to us is that after again, I want to separate. The opening is kind of good. I mean, I highlighted all kinds of things, and I was getting excited about the book, and that's why I wrote you. But then it goes into all this mythology stuff. And they do say, when they're talking about mythologies, this is something I wrote, humanity's ancient mythologies may be reflections of early contact, even conflict with non-human intelligences. Okay, great. And then they start talking, about, the myth of Prometheus and stuff like that. Well, that's pretty interesting, but we don't go any further than that. So if you're just going to stick with the generality that, well, maybe it could have been, okay, well, then I don't need a lot of writing about it. Just like, don't bring up Antarctica if you're not drawing a conclusion about where it fits in our ability to fight a war.
It's a good point. It's a good point.
War, it's freaking war we're talking about, right? And here's the thing. Look, I don't want to be accused of being, someone who's into the threat narrative. I think I've made this clear with all the need to knows I did with Ross Coulthart and with what you and I have talked about. I don't believe per se in the threat narrative. What I believe is people that say, well, they're just friendly space brothers, like in Close Encounters or something. There's no facts to necessarily say that. There are other facts that are kind of negative about contact as we've been experiencing it. And so my attitude is, I go back to Ronald Reagan in the 80s, trust but verify. I'd like to trust this non-human intelligence that seems to be the one that we are dealing with right now. I'd love to trust them. I mean, I hope they come in peace for all mankind, just like we went to the moon. I hope it all works out for us. But I'd like to know if we should be worried. Now, that's an interesting question because, as they point out, the U.S. military, in fact, militaries all over the world, what is their job? Their job is to prepare for war. So if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? So I would expect our militaries to be preparing for war. That's their job. Okay, so I expect that. But I would have liked some analysis from this book as to whether they should be doing that or not. In other words, do we or don't we have a reason to be worried? Do we or don't we have a reason to prepare for war? And if we do have a reason to prepare for war, what are we doing about it? What whistleblowers have spoken to this issue? What's the latest intelligence on it? What does Tim Gallaudet think about this? Is he thinking we should be prepared for war? I don't know. I wish I did.
Response. I don't think they know.
Right.
That's why. And are they right? I don't think they know. And I also think, are they the people that are supposed to tell us and I appreciate that they kind of allude that they don't know and they give both perspectives, because I don't know if Tom DeLonge and Peter are the people that should be telling us if we should be worried or not. But what I think they're doing is laying in the land and saying, make up your own mind. Here's the facts. Here's the history nuggets. We could have taken out the Philadelphia experiment. We could have taken out, anything to do with potentially with Antarctica. It could have been a lot smaller. Mysticism, for sure, we could have narrowed down. But I think that what they were trying to do is saying, I want you to make up your own mind. But what I ended up getting in my thoughts after I did the exact same thing you did, Bryce, which is interesting. Are they worried about something happening? Do they think that contact will be negative? And I actually feel that they do. And I feel that Tom DeLonge, what I got from the book, even though I think it's supposed to be make up your own mind, but I think they're leaning more towards negative when it comes to contact.
Well, that's clearly
and
what
he
Tom
lays
DeLonge
out his thesis in the last paragraph, in the last chapter, why he thinks that. The other element, though, that he does mention, and which we talk about a lot in the UFO space, is that they've never stopped, a war. They've never created it. If anything, they maybe stopped us from, using anything that's nuclear technology, but they've never created any type of war that we know of, right? And they've never really interfered. And so that tells us that they're not generally hostile, because if they were, wouldn't they have done it already? But out of everything that they look at it, and when he does analyze it, and Tom DeLonge and Peter break it down, they look at it from the only perspective that Lou Elizondo and everyone else knows. And they mentioned Christopher Mellon in this a lot with high praise about this is a threat narrative and that it should be looked at it that way. Sure. And I think that that's what they're going on, because that's the only way to look at it until the soft science has come in. And that's where we're seeing it currently. Now, I feel like this book should have been written in around, 2020, 2023.
Right. Yeah.
Not 2024. That's why I'm shocked, because I actually thought the book was at least 5 years old, because there wasn't current events. So I just gave him the benefit of the doubt on that. So now, knowing that, I would have to give my friend this book and then maybe some other books.
You might. I'm not.
But I do think that they were trying to make people to make up their own opinion and assessment based on history, outside of so much of current events.
In my view, I think you're a very nice person, and I like you for your positive and optimistic mental outlook. And I think you're being very kind to them in this regard. I guess my complaint is not that I didn't enjoy learning about Jack Parsons and learning a little bit about mysticism and learning about the occult and learning about Nazis after the war. But that was the primary purpose in the book. And I believe a lot of that stuff should have been in one of their earlier volumes, God or Man. And then I would have read it in a whole different context and said, interesting. I'm glad I have that context as we go into the war book. Okay, but I didn't have that context. Just a couple of things, because I think it's clear my take at this point on their book is what it is. But when we say things like, well, if they were going to do something, they'd have already done it. I always say, yeah, maybe, because if you take a look at what history has taught us, is that here in the United States, we think in 4-year terms because of presidential elections and all that, right? So it's like you got to get a response immediately when you're president. You got to go do something immediately. But, the Chinese think in a different way. They think longer term. They may think like 100 years. I mean, their attitude toward Taiwan has been very patient up until recently, I guess. And how do we know that a non-human intelligence, if it's non-human, doesn't have a different attitude about things? Maybe they think in thousands of years. So maybe the last 80 years that they've been sort of trolling around our skies, maybe to them, that's just phase 1 out of 100. Who knows? I just don't think I have the information to know that. The one other thing I would say in response is, okay, yes, they have shown, I guess what it made me I wanted to consider a little carefully the unsavory possibilities of war. I'll confess, when I read the passages about UFOs over nuclear missile bases or over the White House in 1952, or even the recent drones that we've seen, part of me was saying, yeah, okay, well, that could be interpreted one way, but another way to interpret that would be, what if it was a show of force? That's what some people have said about the drones. The fact that they fly around and we aren't entirely sure what all of them are, and we can't seem to identify them, we can't seem to stop them. Well, that's a show of force. That somebody, maybe it's non-human, maybe it's Chinese, who knows? Somebody is saying we can do this, and you're not really capable of doing much about it. So you could say the same thing about 1952, flying around the White House and the Capitol. And you could certainly say that about the nuclear missiles, that it might be a show of force. And certainly that's how militaries think. So, gosh, I would just have liked to know that they had interviewed a few more people about it to reach some of the questions and conclusions they reached. But as we said, Chrissy, the truth is sometimes you got to write the book that you want to read because they're not doing it. So, for example, the new host on Need to Know is Richard Dolan, who's a preeminent historian, and I look forward to Rich and I doing a show very soon on Need to Know about war. I'm fired up right now. I'm ready to go on this topic. And so, since I didn't get what I wanted out of their book, I got other things. I'm not saying these are not dumb people; they are bright people. But I didn't get what I wanted, so I may have to do it myself with Rich Dolan, because I do think it is time for us to start having authentic, real, grounded conversations on this topic, because to not do that is completely unreasonable. That's my take.
I agree. And it's funny you said that, because I was thinking in my head, I'm like, you need to write that section. I literally was thinking that. I'm like, because I do agree. I would love to read something, even though it is more speculation or it could be tactical. I think we're looking at solutions and tactics. This book is history. It is not solutions and tactics. It just maybe opens your mind again in the last chapter about what could possibly be happening and how to view it from a historical perspective. But yeah, I'm very much a tactics. My background is public relations and media. I'm tactical.
Absolutely.
So I think that I would love to read something like that. Love to be part of the history or the data collection of that, and the history nuggets, along with then the current history nuggets that are happening now. Because you're right, we need to put together a plan. And again, I've been having this conversation. I spoke to Avi Loeb and did an interview with him when we talked about Three Eye Atlas. And I said, okay, let's just talk about this hypothetically, because nobody's talking about it yet. I said, when Three Eye Atlas moves past the sun and we see that's coming directly towards us, how long do we have? And he went, I said, do we have hours? Do we have days? How long do we have? And he said, well, we have months. And I said, okay, that's better than, right.
Yeah.
That's better than days, because
it's
that
better than the
important.
three-body problem where they have 50 years or something, right? We have
Exactly.
months. So you better have a plan.
So right now we're speculating that the American government doesn't have a plan, which I bet you they have somewhat.
I think they have a plan.
They have somewhat of a plan.
The military
we know SETI has a plan. The United Nations don't think they have a plan. But I know SETI does. SETI's been working on this issue and looking at solutions and how to look at contact and what we should do for contact. They've been doing this for many years, right? And I think it's wonderful. And I would love to see what SETI has to say now, right? Compared to the work they've been doing in the hard sciences and the soft sciences. But you're right. I think from a civilian perspective, how do we go about doing this? How do we communicate with each other? How do we look at this from, again, a data perspective? How do we look at this from a solution perspective? Do we look at this from a war perspective and a military perspective? Is that how we should go about doing that? And is this a threat? So I think you're very right. From a comms perspective, we don't have it, and it's so important. And this is the time, and more than likely, Three Eye Atlas is just an icy comet. But you know
Probably.
what? That icy comet one day might be a UFO that is coming closer to Earth, and we might have a larger form of disclosure. And we can't say that we didn't have time or chances to prepare.
you know, it is a good point you make. First of all, I would assume some people, either in the defense industry or in the Pentagon, have a plan of some kind. Okay. But I don't expect them to tell me the plan. At this point, nobody is going to declassify a strategy or a plan for dealing
No
with
way.
hostile alien contact. But that's kind of what I wanted in the book. I thought, okay, since my Department of Defense isn't going to even admit these things are real at this point, I don't expect them to tell me how a battle would go, but maybe you guys could. So the one thing I would, as we end this thing, and it's been a fascinating conversation, and I'm kind of glad to hear us seeing it from different points of view. And I hope people, instead of saying, why don't they agree on it? I hope they enjoy a spirited debate. But I would say this: of all the people I want to interview right now, I want to interview Tom DeLonge the most. And if Tom DeLonge wants to come on this show or Need to Know with me and Dolan, I'd welcome him in a second, because I would like to know what conclusions he has reached and how he currently feels in 2025, because I don't think he got to put his best foot forward with this book. And I know he is he's a smart guy, very bright guy, and he's thought about this a lot. And he seems, in his remarks and in the tail end of this book, to be a little on edge about the whole thing. And I assume, since Tom DeLonge has talked to a lot of military people as sort of his entrance to the topic, some of them have told him these things. So I'd like to talk to him. But you know what? We need to wrap around the corner on this, because you got a surprise to lay on me, and I kind of want to hear what it is.
Sorry, say that one more time.
You have a surprise to lay on me, and I want to hear what it is. I'm talking about next month's book.
Next month's book. I was going to say, I have another surprise.
Well, listen, you can lay any surprise on me you want, but wait, don't even do that. That just, you know what I'm saying. All right.
Yes, we do. We have our next book. And so our next book, most people, I would imagine, have not heard about it. I did not hear about this until Christopher Mellon actually recommended it to myself and Dan McClure, which is a mutual friend of ours. We were out for dinner one night in, oh my gosh, what city were we in? I forget now. I forget what city we're in. Anyway, we were all out for dinner, and we asked him, I've asked Christopher Mellon multiple times what books I should read and what does he recommend, right? Because you always kind of want to know what they're reading. I think it's really important.
Absolutely.
Right. And so he's given me multiple books over the years. But specifically, he did say to me, which was interesting, he said to Dan and I, and we must have been on the conversation around psyops and things to that degree, but he said, read Above Black. Project Perverse Destiny, an insider account of alien contact and government cover-ups. So apparently, allegedly, this is a true story that is about a USAF member, so an Air Force member, while working for the National Security Agency, so the NSA, as an intelligence specialist. The book talks about him being part of a project called Preserve Destiny, a project deeply involved with alien contact. So I thought it was interesting that Christopher Mellon suggested this to me, and it's a very light book. It's like 120 pages. It's not very long. Most of the other books he's recommended have been a lot longer and more in depth and have a great history base. But I thought this little info nugget that he gave me of a book was interesting. And so nobody's read it that I know of, except for maybe Dan and I and a few people. So if you have read it, please let us know in Twitter or in the chat, in the comments. But also, and if you liked it or not, and what you thought about it, because I think I don't know what I'm getting myself into. So I'm bringing it with me, Bryce. I have no idea. So get ready, buckle up. We're going in.
I can't wait, because yes. I've heard about this book, and I remember looking it over at one time and thinking, it looks so self-published and so hard to get your brain around. And there wasn't the easy ability to get anything but the Kindle of it when I went shopping for it. I thought, this could be just one of those books. And we know what we're talking about. There's so many books written about this topic, but some of them are just harangues. Some of them aren't even true. And so there's just a lot. And I thought maybe that's one of them. So I'm really interested in in reading it. This is going to be so much fun to talk about next month. I really am looking forward to it. And honestly, I'm a big fan of Chris Melanese, a consultant on a TV pilot I wrote. And I just think the world of the guy. I think he is solid, grounded, thoughtful, everything that you would want in somebody. And for him to say, you should check it out, I'm going to check it out. So
yeah. It's a quick read. Dan said he read it. Literally, he bought the Kindle and read it on the plane flying back to Toronto. So, and he said it was great. When we haven't discussed it yet either, because I haven't read the book. So I've been meaning, I keep asking him, is the funny thing. I'll text him and be like, what's that book name again? What's that book name again? And so finally now we're reading the book.
I think that's just right for you. I know you've got the Toronto International Film Festival next month to occupy a little bit of your time. So a quick read would be good. And I, go to all the Emmy events every year, and they're in September. So I wouldn't complain about a quick read myself. So we'll give it a quick read, and we'll be back next month, folks, and tell you more about it. And, by the way, Chrissy, great conversation, in my view. Peter Levenda is probably never going to return my phone calls again. Sorry, Peter, but, whatever. It's a book club. We speak our minds.
Can't win them all. We can't all be pizza.
All right. Well, Chrissy, great. Let's get these cups up. Yes, we're going to find a way so that you can buy a book club cup, but we haven't figured that out yet. Anyway, thanks. See you later, Chrissy. See you next month.
Project Book Club is produced by Bryce Zabel and Tyler Stevens and is brought to you by Stellar Productions. You can learn more about us and what we do at projectbookclub.net. We appreciate you and hope you'll spread the word. See you next time, because every book you haven't read is a new one.